Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Evergreen's calling.
Are you getting enough CBD each day? Hemp Meds carries the most trusted CBD oil brands like Real Scientific Hemp Oil and Dixie Botanicals to make it easy to add cannabinoids like CBD to your diet. We hold all our hemp oil products to our rigorous triple lab tested standard to ensure that you and your family receive only the highest quality and most reliable CBD products. Hemp Meds is your trusted source for CBD. Visit hempmeds.com to get our premium CBD oil today. Use discount code CBD20 to get 20% off your first order. And now, broadcasting on StarWorldWideNetworks.com, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Evergreen is calling.
Hi, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm your host, Snowden Bishop. We're at the start of Autism Awareness Month, so I really wanted to dedicate today's show to it. And rather than going into my usual opinions in a monologue, I just really want to get right to introducing our guests. I cannot think of anything more devastating for a parent than learning that your child will have special needs, and especially if your child was developmentally perfect for a few years and then suddenly was diagnosed with autism. When we began this journey last year, we interviewed 3 mothers of special needs children. Each of them had debilitating illnesses and one with autism. They were all frustrated with the pharmaceutical protocols that had not only failed to make their children well, they actually made their children's conditions worse. Each of them had witnessed firsthand miraculous results using cannabis to treat a variety of those conditions, from autism to cerebral palsy. Today, one of those mothers is here to talk about the miracles she's experienced with cannabis ever since then. Brandy Williams. Her son Logan has autism that was so severe that he couldn't be around other children or even attend school. And when she learned about cannabis, she wasn't sure how he would respond. A year after beginning treatment with medical marijuana, Logan is leading a much more normal life and allowing the family to lead a more normal life as well. Today, she'll be joined by Dr. Bogner, who's a champion in the effort to help families with autistic children learn about and access medical marijuana as an alternative to the dangerous pharmaceuticals. He's been researching and lecturing about the benefits of cannabis for the autism spectrum for the last decade. Fighting to change legislation in several states to have autism added to medical marijuana programs and developing new treatment modalities are his core interests. He's published several articles about the complexities in autism and cannabis as an alternative treatment. And for him, his interests are very personal. He knows the issue very well. He is a parent of an autistic child himself. Before I bring them on, Dr. Brian Donner has our Medical Marijuana Minute update. What do you have for us today, Dr. Donner?
Thank you, Snowden. Autism is a very important topic in our country today, and I'm happy to speak about this briefly. Autism is a complex syndrome with a wide spectrum of severity, from barely noticeable attention deficits and learning disabilities to extreme catatonia and self-injurious behavior. For families, learning a child is autistic is often heartbreaking, and answers are often difficult to find. What makes it more devastating is the uncertainty that comes with the pharmacological medications that are used to treat this condition, as they can often cause debilitating side effects and have a narrow therapeutic window. Scientists and researchers have yet to definitively confirm the exact causes, although there are a number of theories being explored. Whatever the cause, the fact remains that, to date, there are no known cures for autism, and our current treatments are marginal at best. In the recent years, however, we have seen some compelling testimonials from parents who have chosen to forego traditional pharmaceutical treatment and use medical cannabis as an alternative. For some physicians and healthcare providers, abandoning conventional medical protocol takes a leap of faith, particularly since we lack the clinical studies proving the efficacy of treating autism with medical marijuana. But with mounting anecdotal evidence, testimony from parents who swear it helps their children, and further clinical research in the pipeline, medical cannabis is absolutely an option that should be explored as a treatment for autism. I'm looking forward to hearing what Dr. Christian Bogner, one of the leading experts in medical cannabis and autism, has to say about this today. He will be speaking on the subject at our upcoming World Medical Cannabis Conference and Expo later this month. If either you or someone you love is dealing with autism, I highly recommend attending the conference and letting your physician know about it. I'm Dr. Brian Donner for the Cannabis Reporter. I'll be back again next week with another Medical Marijuana Minute. Back to you, Snowden.
Thank you so much, Dr. Donner. Look forward to hearing from you again next week. So let's get started. Dr. Christian Bogner, I am really delighted that you are here today and also joined with Brandy Williams. The two of you, I think, will lend a nice depth to this discussion. So thanks to both of you for joining me.
Thanks for having us. We're excited.
Yeah. So, Dr. Bogner, let me start with you, because I know that you have been dealing with this issue of autism for quite some time. Tell me how you came to learn that medical marijuana might be a great alternative.
Great question. As you heard from the introduction, many parents are not satisfied with the mainstream treatment modalities, which are usually heavy pharmaceuticals that are even dangerous for adults. We're talking about antipsychotic medication, and that we use off-label for these children. They have a whole plethora of side effects, and most of the time it's just treating different symptoms, most of the time trying to control aggressive behaviors, and like in my case, personal case, failed. And so my interest in this is because I learned about cannabis and I saw the effects of cannabis on these children, and then rather than being satisfied with what the mainstream has to offer, I basically reverse researched this, and I wanted to find out why is it working for these children. And that's pretty much it. Over the years, we've formed huge coalitions in several states. We're very progressive with this. Currently, we have 2 states that allow autism specifically to be added to it is added to the medical marijuana programs, which is Delaware and Pennsylvania, and in California, which has the umbrella possibilities for the physician to basically give medical cannabis for any condition. And currently there's Texas and Georgia who are very close. In fact, today Georgia just passed the House, and it's going to the Senate now, so they're very excited, and wonderful efforts, even with the House representatives that support those things. Yeah, and so we're moving ahead with this, and that's very exciting. And yes, there's great science to back up cannabis as a valid modality for children with autism. And I'll leave it up to you how deep you want to dig into the science of why that is. But it is
I'd
very,
like to. I would really like to hear in depth about the science. It always surprises me that certain states do not have autism, any spectrum, listed as a qualifying condition in their medical marijuana programs. And like it is here in Arizona, and fortunately, there are a number of conditions that are broad enough that you could almost say that most children with autism might even have those conditions, that do qualify. Brandy, I know that you had that issue here in Arizona because autism is not a qualifying condition here, but I think that Logan actually had additional symptoms that did qualify. Is that correct?
Yes. He had several comorbid conditions, and epilepsy being one of them. So that is how we gained legal access here in Arizona for Logan. And I just have to say, by the time Logan was 3, his aggression really picked up. And by the time we didn't identify the seizures until later on. I thought they were tics. He was having what they call absent seizures, and the developmental pediatrician picked up on those and sent us in for an EEG, and he was diagnosed with, epilepsy. So by the time he was 4, they wanted Logan to be on Risperdal and for the behavior, and Keppra for the seizures. And I had already been going to several, moms groups. There's so many groups for autism nowadays. I could go to 3 meetings every week, and I've always been active, trying to help my son and improve the quality of his life. We had gained early intervention when he was 2. So I've talked to a lot of moms, and the stories about Risperdal were horrifying, and the Keppra didn't work, and they had constantly had to alter their children's medication, and it wasn't really helping.
Yeah.
So I have a very sensitive family. A lot of family members have really bad reactions to pharmaceutical medication, and that's what led me to seek other options for my son. I actually have a direct cousin who had a dystonic reaction to Risperdal, and that's something that scared the daylights out of me, and I did not want to put my son through that. So,
is Risperdal a benzodiazepine?
That's a good question for Dr. Bogner. It wasn't ever an option for me, so I'm not sure.
Dr. Bogner,
I know it's antipsychotic.
What are your thoughts about that? What kind of a medication is that?
Risperdal is considered an antipsychotic medication.
Oh, okay.
And the problems with Risperdal, and in fact, this is one of the only medications that's FDA approved for treating aggressive behaviors in autism. The problem with the Risperdal is it's not only has it a huge list of side effects, but it's about 80 to 90% of these children have excessive weight gain, and that's a huge problem. I see a lot of patients that they weigh close to 250, 300 pounds. They've been on years of Risperdal, and so this is really not a good option for these kids, in my opinion.
Right. So, gosh, Brandy, when Logan was 2, is that when he was diagnosed?
He regressed at 1 year old, and I brought it up to his pediatrician, and they just kept telling me that boys were slower, and so it took some time to get them to listen to me, and he was diagnosed just before he was 3.
Okay, and
there was kind of when the aggression picked up, and
right.
by 4, the doctor, we couldn't even bring him in for a doctor's appointment without him, just destroying the office and biting and ripping my hair out. He wouldn't even walk independently. We had to bring Logan into the doctor's office right when they needed to see him, and then we had to bring him out of the office and have him sit in the car with the habilitation specialist while I went back into the doctor's office to discuss my son, because we couldn't even have a conversation over his screaming. So
yeah, that's just heartbreaking. And do you know how this was brought on?
Okay, I can talk about that if you want, because I'm going full blown ahead against the CDC.
Yeah, I would like to do that. Dr. Bogner, often we hear about children who are developing normally, and then, suddenly they're diagnosed with autism because certain behaviors start. After you would think that it's something that they would have from birth, but what are your theories on this?
Well, Snowden, let's look at the facts. In 1980, the incidence of autism was about 1 in 10,000, and at that time, which was about 30 years ago, a child by 15 months received 8 vaccinations. In 2015, a child receives 24 vaccinations, and the autism rate is 1 in 68. That means over the last 30 years, we have a 13,000% increase in autism. And Snowden, I just let you know, this is not because we diagnose autism better. The answer is vaccines, and I'm standing fully behind it, and I can prove it.
You know, I've heard this from a number of different people, and I do have an occasion to talk to a lot of parents who are dealing with autism, and so many of them feel that way because they've noticed a change after the vaccine protocols. I mean, is there anything being done to, on a clinical level to research that as a theory?
There's no study that the CDC backs up that compares vaccinated versus non-vaccinated children and compares the autism rate.
Yeah. I mean, and some people also point to like the heavy metals that are in the soils that are in the food that we eat. And I mean, I think that from a logical standpoint, you would think that like genetically modified food sources are also contributing to this because of the heavy amount of herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, all of that. What do you think about that?
Well, if you want me to explain this from A to Z, it's probably going to be about a 5-minute run to kind of walk you through a typical normal child development and then why this child develops autism. You want me to do that?
I would love you to do that, because at the end of that, then what I'm trying to arrive at are some really good, solid medical reasons that parents with children of autism should consider medical cannabis as an alternative. But I'd like to hear first, like, run through some of the physiological characteristics.
Okay, very good. Well, imagine this. Imagine you become pregnant. And when you're pregnant, you take prenatal vitamins. And you also take a glucola test when you're 28 weeks, which is a sugar test, which is corn-based. And you also receive usually about 2 vaccinations, which is the Tdap and the flu shot. Now, I mention these things because all of these things that I just mentioned contain a chemical called glyphosate, which, as you mentioned, is an herbicide, which is also known as Round-up, produced by Missouri company Monsanto. This chemical, we have a plethora of studies that confirm that it causes inflammation of the bowel. It's a very acidic molecule, and it's contaminating vaccinations, it's contaminating prenatal vitamins, and it's contaminating all of our food sources that are soy-based and corn-based, which is pretty much 80% of your supermarket food contaminated with glyphosate. And so this chemical starts leaking already in pregnancy through the placenta into the fetus, starting its action. And it doesn't stop there. Once your child is born, you have the first vaccinations directly into the child, which is hepatitis B, and it's been found in hepatitis B as well, but also in formula. 8 out of 10 women by 6 months supplement their child with formula, and it was found in Infamil and Similac. And it even was found in the breast milk of mothers because they consume genetically modified food. And so, again, the problem with this chemical is that it causes gastrointestinal inflammation, and that's very well researched. It starts to then cause a syndrome called leaky gut syndrome, which is basically the way you want to imagine this is when your gut starts leaking protein into your bloodstream. You're not supposed to absorb protein. You're actually supposed to break down protein in your gut and then absorb the amino acids. But if you absorb protein, then your immune system will cross-react to that because it's too big of a molecule, and you start developing basically a systemic inflammatory condition. The problem is that then this glyphosate molecule destroys an enzyme in your liver, and that was very well researched by Stephanie Seneff, who's probably the leading authority of glyphosate in this country. She's out of MIT, and so inhibits an enzyme in your liver. It's called P450. And this P450 enzyme is an enzyme that your liver utilizes to basically detoxify the body. But it also produces a compound called GCMAF, which is a very powerful molecule that you can imagine being like a Pac-Man that eats up all this protein that you started leaking into your body. So again, if you don't have that because the glyphosate inhibited that, then you have permanent inflammation in your body. So that is the case. So imagine this baby being colic, and the pediatrician tells you, oh, the baby will grow out of it, and when in reality, the little baby's gastrointestinal tract is inflamed because of the formula's glyphosate contamination. And then all of a sudden, you get a vaccination. And the thing with the vaccination is this. It's really all of the vaccinations nowadays contain aluminum. The thimerosal, which was the mercury, is really not anymore in any vaccinations, just a couple of them. And I think it's the meningococcal or pneumococcal, but nothing that really the child is exposed to in the first 15 months. And why they place aluminum in a vaccine is because the aluminum will bind to the specific antigen of that virus that you want to get immunity against. For example, if you want to vaccinate a child against mumps, measles, or rubella, you put a little part, an inactivated part of that virus into that vaccine, and that binds to the aluminum, because the aluminum will present that antigen longer to the body, so you have a stronger immune response. And we call those little particles adjuvants. And these adjuvants were added to vaccines in the 1990s. That's when really the vaccine rates skyrocketed. And usually we inject those things into the baby's upper thighs. And so the question is, how does the baby become autistic? Because usually we believe that autism is, a brain problem, and it is. But as I mentioned before, when you have a systemic inflammation because of all this protein that leaked into the body, your body really doesn't have any chance to eat up the adjuvant with the aluminum. So it starts traveling, and it actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. And this is when it really gets interesting. When the aluminum with the specific antigen starts entering the brain environment, that's when trouble is starting, because you have to remember that the brain environment is completely different from the rest of your body. We have the blood-brain barrier that only passes certain molecules through, but once that leaks through, you have a completely different response than what your body is creating immunity against the virus that you injected. So what happens in the brain is really revolutionary in our understanding, and that just really came to the surface within the last several years. You have a little cell in your brain. It's called microglia. And a microglia cell is actually, there's so many microglial cells in your skull, they outnumber your neuron, your brain cells, by 1.5 to 1. So those little microglia cells are a phenomenal cell. They if you want to imagine like a little cell with like tentacle arms, they're basically the surveillance cell of the brain environment. They sense the most little threat, the most little molecule, or the most little abnormality. They immediately sense that and alert other cells that there's a threat, because the brain wants to protect itself, of course. And so it needs to alert other cells to take care of the threat. And so let's say the little aluminum that was in the vaccine, which is bound to the antigen, let's call it AS04, for example, because that's the first adjuvant that gets injected into the baby. AS04 is a adjuvant that was produced to create a response, and that's, for example, in the hepatitis B shot that the baby gets in the first 24 hours of life. And so you inject that into the baby, and AS04 crosses the brain, and it puts these microglial cells into a pro-inflammatory state. What that means is that little antigen docks onto a receptor of that microglial cell, and the microglial cell then releases a lot of what we call cytokines. Cytokines are just little messenger molecules that alert other microglial cells to come and fight the threat. Your brain doesn't know that there's no viral infection or bacterial infection. You injected the antigen for it. So the cells basically think this could be the biggest viral infection ever. So it recruits a lot of cells to take care of that. And that basically is an inflammation of the brain is starting to happen. And it's an aseptic inflammation. It's not an infection. It's not a bacteria or a virus that takes over the brain, but it's an adjuvant. So you still create that inflammation in the brain. And that's the beginning of autism, if you want to understand that. Then you get, 24 vaccines until the age of 15. And you have different adjuvants and different vaccines that activate different receptors on the microglial cells. For example, we have the MMR virus, which has the rubella in it and the measles. Both of those particles that they put in there are very powerful activators of microglia. And hepatitis B is docking on a different receptor. So by the time you hit 1 year of age, all of these different vaccines activated all of the receptors on microglia. And once they are in an inflammatory state, the microglia, you usually can't kick them back into an anti-inflammatory state unless you send the signal to it. And what I mean by that is that usually your brain has its own protective mechanism of kicking back into the non-inflammatory state of microglia. But unfortunately, that doesn't work either, because there's another chemical in the vaccines that we found over the last year. And that was great works by Stephanie Staniff and by Zen Honeycutt from Moms Across America. They found that glyphosate is contaminating every childhood vaccine that's out there, specifically MMR in the highest concentration. And as I mentioned earlier, P450 in the liver is also in the brain. Microglial cells have P450. So the bottom line is that this glyphosate also leaks into the brain and inhibits the brain flipping out of this inflammatory state into an anti-inflammatory state. So the brain cannot self-correct. It cannot self-regulate. And you're in a permanent inflammatory state, basically, to say it more simple.
That is fascinating, tragic, but fascinating. And I'm wondering, I mean, is there no way to reverse that process once it starts?
It is. The process is very reversible, in my opinion, at least. So, as I mentioned, you need to send a signal to these microglial cells, basically telling them, hey, you all relax. Stop being so angry. Stop being inflamed. And usually, like I said, the brain does it itself, and the microglial cell has this enzyme on there where it actually pulls your own endocannabinoid. And I hope I don't have to explain too much what the endocannabinoid system is. I think your audience probably very well understands that.
I think they're pretty close to understanding it, yes.
So endocannabinoid system, you have two endocannabinoids that are mostly studied, anandamide and 2-HE. Anandamide is, you can say it's very parallel to the plant THC, and it docks onto a receptor called CB1 usually. But what your brain does, in 13 different brain regions, we have a very high production of anandamide. It's a neurotransmitter that we produce as we speak right now. But it pulls that molecule, the anandamide, the microglia do, to produce a different endocannabinoid. And that was studied at the University of Michigan, that it actually produces a CB2 analog, which is 1,000 times stronger than CBD. And that molecule is called 5.6-EET-EAS. if anybody wants to look that up. And that is 1,000 times stronger than CBD, like I said, and docks onto the CB2 receptor to kick the microglia out of the inflammatory state. Now, it cannot do that because glyphosate inhibits the P450 enzyme to do that. So the conclusion is that basically all the research that I've done, I have multiple sources that confirm that cannabis, specifically THC, kicks the microglia into the anti-inflammatory state.
Wow. So, okay, so now that explains it incredibly well. So, Brandy, I'd like to go back to you on this because that's sort of the scientific explanation, but what I'd love to hear from you is the anecdotal evidence that you've seen. Once you started giving Logan cannabis therapy, it was whole plant, is that correct? Meaning,
yeah.
Okay. So tell me what happened once you started giving Logan cannabis. What were some of the very noticeable effects, and how has it been going over the last year since we talked about this?
Well, I noticed within the first 20 minutes of his first dose, my son had this stiff, rigid hand flap, and it looks very uncomfortable. And he has bruxism, which he grinds his teeth. All of his baby teeth are pretty much flat. And he had a really loud pitched verbal stim. And he kind of just, his body just relaxed. And he came and he sat down for the first time. My son used to just stand there and jump up and down. He gets a lot of input from that. And he would just pace back and forth all the time. He was a nervous wreck, you know. And so within the first 20 minutes, he was very calm. And I was so surprised. Okay, I'm so sorry. I had to go get him.
Yeah, I know. I understand. You have to get your son. But go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my son also, he never slept. He would lay in bed for hours. We'd have everything off, and he would like flop in bed like a fish. He had to sleep in our room because he had the seizures, and he never slept. We had to sleep with one eye open and sleep in shifts. He would have to jump up out of bed and get input. He would like jump up and shut the door 5-6 times, lay back down, flop around, get out of bed again, open the washer 4 to 6 times. And so, you know, eventually he would pass out from exhaustion. After we gave him cannabis, he could crawl into bed when he was tired and fall asleep without stimming, without thrusting his gut, because he also has gut issues. Sleep is so important. I have gotten sleep every night since my son has been in bed before 9 o'clock, ever since cannabis. I didn't even realize how important sleep was, but
yeah, I mean, you were really dealing with it, and then also
we couldn't even own furniture. He would take the chairs and slam the backs of the chairs down to the ground until all of them broke. We had every single door in our house had a hole in it from his head. I had a metal front door. There was over 30 dents in my metal front door when we moved. My son put his head through a double pane window. He knocked out his own teeth. He's head butted a brick wall. You know, I have scars all over my arms from him biting through my skin. He wouldn't even walk independently. I had to carry him on my shoulders, and he would bite my scalp and rip my hair out with his teeth. You know, and people just stare away. I couldn't take him anywhere.
And people will think you're a bad parent.
Yeah, they do. They don't know what's going on, you know?
I can only imagine. Ugh.
I feel like I had to wear autism awareness stuff all over me just so people would get it. And even then, he would have a really loud verbal stim. He was really uncomfortable. I mean, he couldn't tolerate his environment. It was way too overwhelming for him. I couldn't even get him to wear clothes. He would just rip his clothes off. I had to get him a high-top shoes. I had to get him some Converse so he couldn't get his shoes off, and he would lift his head and hit himself in the head with his shoes. And I'm really glad that I had a HAB worker in my home for 40 hours a week because
it's necessary. Oh,
yeah.
But now, Brandy, I mean,
we almost got kicked out of behavioral therapy because they couldn't even help my son. Yeah. And we started interventions before his official diagnosis, so he's had therapy ever since he's 2. And I just don't know.
But now, tell me what's going on now, because it's been, about a year, right? Since you...
No, he's had access to cannabis since June of 2015.
Okay. So
within the first 2 months, he added over 180 words to his vocabulary. His ATEX score dropped 56 points in 6 months.
Wow.
Which is a huge deal.
That's
We've tried a lot of different interventions. We've looked at heavy metals. We've done hyperbaric oxygen therapy. We've done a lot of different modalities to help Logan. And they were short-lived. You saw a little improvement and then you'd go back. And then you'd see a little improvement and you go back. Cannabis has been consistent. He continues to amaze me every day. My son is now in school. I couldn't even bring him to school. I couldn't get him to wear clothes, and I couldn't get him into the car to even get him to school. Now he gets himself dressed, and he is so much cognitive. He's so much more aware cognitively. The other day I asked Logan, "Hey, where's your shoes?" And he went around and looked in all the spots where we leave his shoes. And 2 years ago, I couldn't call his name. He wouldn't even look at me.
Wow. So now it's like you have your son back.
Oh, he's engaging with people. The other day we were at Walmart and we were talking to one of the employees, and he came around and stood right in front of him and looked him right in his face, grabbed his hand and said hi.
Wow.
And he says hi and bye to everybody now. We couldn't even get him to sit down at a therapy table. Now he will sit down at a therapy table for an hour and attend to a therapist-led task. So, my son couldn't even function to do therapy. Now that he has relief, he can actually function and work on academia and, behaviors.
Yeah.
Before he was, I can only imagine what he was going through. I mean, to want to beat your head, you must be in some kind of pain. And that's the thing that us mothers are told, is that it's a autism behavior. It's a genetic, disorder, and, here's some Risperdal and a script for a helmet. But a helmet's not going to stop my son from banging his head.
Right.
It's only going to soften the blow.
Yeah.
My son was banging his head 75 to 150 times per day. We had that HAB worker mark those, and I haven't seen my son headbang in so long. I haven't been headbutted myself in so long. Speaking of, I did get a concussion at one point from getting headbutted from taking a banana away from Logan.
Oh my goodness. Brandy, it's your story just touches my heart so deeply. God, I remember the first time we had you on, you brought me to tears, and you've done it again.
It's really hard to not. I don't know if you can hear my voice shake because it's really hard not to cry. I am so proud of my son. Can't say that enough.
Yeah. Oh, and
we had to take him in for some stitches. We ran out of cannabis for 3 weeks, and you could tell, like, after day 2 with no cannabis, the behaviors start to come back. It's harder for him to, function. But as soon as you get him his medicine, he's good.
Yeah.
So,
Dr. Bogner, has this been your experience with parents who have tried cannabis as well, that the effects are almost immediate?
Absolutely. And that's exactly the reason why cannabis works, because of these microglial cells just switching. Imagine it like you're drinking 10 tequila shots and some other alcohol, and then you're in a room and you turn off the light, and now somebody tells you, go to the sink and brush your teeth. Somebody calls your name, you don't really know because it's so dark and you're so drunk. Your brain just doesn't work, and then you should navigate through the world when the light is off. Cannabis is like putting the light switch on immediately. The effects are really profound. And, Brandy is just one of those like brave parents that comes on the radio and talks about this. There's a whole underground movement with this, where a lot of parents, they don't want to talk about it, but they see the tremendous effects. And, you should join some groups on social media, like the Mama group out of Texas are probably the biggest ones. And that's why we're changing laws in states, because it works. This is not bogus. And, we have the evidence that backs it up. And we just need the legislators to listen and understand, and they agree. And so I think we're at the point where every state should make this at least an option. We're not trying to change autism treatment. We just want to change and help these parents from getting prosecuted. It's their choice. It's not the state's choice. It's the parents and their doctor's choice to use cannabis, not the federal government. And that's why this is such a big problem. We just want to protect them. If they choose that for their child, let them.
Right.
Cannabis has never in the history of humans killed anybody. So what is the big deal? Risperidol certainly has killed children. Yeah. So it's a big problem. And
the only option I was given as a parent, honestly, was the helmet, the Risperidol, and please consider putting your son in a group home.
Right.
So,
you have him going to school, and it's because of a plan.
And like you said, he can actually function in therapy and in a school setting. I had to homeschool my son. It's not only us parents that have to deal with these children in society. It's our teachers. It's our doctors. I couldn't even have my son in the doctor's office with his doctor. So our first responders, our police department, our emergency medical, talk to them. They have to deal with these severely autistic populations. Every medical professional that I have dealt with Logan is absolutely blown away.
Yeah.
And they're very much encouraging me to, influence a policy change here in Arizona to add autism to the qualifying list.
Yeah. We have so much work to do, and I would really love to follow up this discussion with both of you. I'm getting the signal from our producer. I cannot believe that our time has gone by so quickly today, but I'm so touched, Brandy, by the progress. I'm so delighted to hear that Logan is doing so much better. And Dr. Bogner, what you're doing is so incredibly important. And, I really am looking forward to following up with you on this discussion. And I'll see you in Pittsburgh at the medical cannabis event. And I just have to say thank you both so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Snowden, and we really appreciate what you do to raise awareness and shedding light on this. This is what we need. We need more people like you to have an open mind about this, even if it's about vaccines. And there's a lot of anti-vax movements out, pro-vax, aggressive people. attack us, and to shed light on this is really a heroic thing of you to do. So I want to thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Brandy. And I'll follow up with you again soon, too. So once again, that was Dr. Christian Bogner and Brandy Williams. And I really appreciate them sharing their personal stories and work that they're doing and all of the progress and everything with us today. If you'd like to learn more about what they're doing and find out more about what you can do if you have a child or know someone who has a child who has autism, please visit us online at thecannabisreporter.com. I will put information on the website. Click broadcast, find today's show, and you will find some information about that. I'd also like to say thank you so much to Dr. Brian Donner for our Medical Marijuana Minute update. And thank you a million times over to our producer, Wendy West, and the team at Star Worldwide Networks for making us shine. I'd also like to express our gratitude for our sponsors, HempMeds.com and Defa Labs. We would not be here without you, so thank you so much. And last but not least, thanks to all of you for listening. Tune in next week, same time, same place, for another episode of the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay informed, share what you've learned, and make it a great day.
Evergreen is calling, evergreen is always where I feel fine. The blue is blue falling, and sheets made forever across the great divide.
Pure CBD is a new and unique fresh-tasting spray product which delivers an exact measured amount of the highest grade 100% cannabis oil with each spray. Each tube holds a 30-day supply when used as directed. No smoke, no mess. For discreet use, Pure CBD can be used anywhere. Pure CBD from Zephyr Labs.